Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi, this being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of American Gods. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we had the conversation. We don't get the full conversation, but I guess Laura kind of filled Shadow in on everything that went down, and I thought it was kind of a pretty neat thing of him being like, wow, I mean, you died and you came back. It's kind of like, that's crazy. You know, she's like, yeah, and you haven't even died once. And just like, you know, what life's kind of, you know, what her journey has been. But now it's an opportunity to like, hey, I need to know where Wednesday's at. And he's like, I can't tell you that. He's like, what are you going to do? Just kill Wednesday? He's like, yeah, sticking to the plan. But it's like, for him, it's like, you have a second chance on life. Well, a second chance. And what are you going to do? Just keep, you know, for him, it's like, live your life like you had this opportunity, just kind of leave the past behind, move forward. But for her, it's like, you know, after everything Wednesday did to her, like, how could she just do that? Like, how could she just let it all go? Like, is she supposed to just kind of move on and let him kind of walk away scot-free? But it's also like, the past can't be changed. What's done is done. Like, what would killing him do? But it's like, at the very least, it'll stop him from damaging other people's lives. You know, I mean, Wednesday does have the tendency to be a wrecking ball in people's lives in many different regards. But when Shadow still won't help her, she's like, why? Like, what good thing he's ever done? It's like, he's my dad. And it's like, oh, she's like, nothing really surprises me anymore. That took me for a loop. It's like, yeah. You know, it's like, it complicates things. For him, but not for her. It's, you know, but, you know, it's like, at the very least, could you give me, like, you know, send me off with a wish me luck? And it's like, he's like, I can't even do that. Like, you know, because regardless of anything, knowing the manipulator, the deceiver that he is, it's at the end of the day, that is still his father, you know? Especially Shadow growing up, always wanting to know that other half of himself, you know? Wondering who his dad was. Like, you know, this is an aspect of his life he's been missing, and, you know, now knowing who his dad is and an opportunity to really get to know not only his dad, but, you know, himself entirely, it's just, you know, it's an opportunity you can't pass up, because it's like, you know, because I think Laura is also coming from this because we learned, like, the complicated family situation she comes from. I'm sure maybe on some level that plays a part in it, but it's like, more so than anything, it's like, hey, you know, my dad was screwy in his own right. That his issues caused me some problems, kind of led to a lot of my issues as an adult, growing up in general, but, you know, so she understands a complicated father situation, but it's like, yeah, my dad screwed up some lives, particularly his, mine, and my mom's, but more so than anything, Wednesday's done a lot of damn damage, so it's like, who can we really just let him be, you know? But I like that, like, awkward moment, you know, they're hugging and everything, and then Marguerite comes in, and he kind of pushes her, Laura aside, and like, oh, hi, Mike, and it's like, oh, yeah, this is Laura, she's my late wife, ex-wife, ex-wife, and it's like, oh, you never met she was married? And it's like, yeah, really? It's like, yeah, it was just for a little bit, just a small period of time, and I even love Laura playing into him, be like, oh, he's stumbling a little bit, that just shows you how much he's in love or something like that, and it's like, oh, and he's like, well, hey, we'll see you around, Mike. Also, like, pass that message on to your father. So it was kind of a neat moment right there. But also, like, him, like, dancing to Poison, and I love that, like, she catches him, and he's just like, whoa, because she scared the shit out of him. It's like, here you are, you know, shotgun lady sneaking up on people. It's not cool. But, like, asking her, you know, to come over for dinner, and she's actually inviting him over for dinner, which is pretty neat. It's like, oh, my sister's in town and stuff. It's like, all right, that's cool. I love the surprise of, hey, guess who my sister is? It's Sam from last season. It's like, oh. And she's like, Shadow Moon? He's like, oh, shit. It's like, yeah, this is my half-sister. Same dad, different moms. And it's like, oh, boy. So it made dinner a little awkward, but Sam didn't blow his cover, because I was like, you guys weren't on bad terms. Like, you were on pretty good terms, so it's like, yeah, thanks for not blowing my cover. It's like, you tried to, like, scam $20 off like a store clerk, yeah, I still gave you a ride, so I wasn't going to, like, bust your chops too much. But it's like, I do have a sixth sense for this type of stuff, so you hurt my sister, I'm coming for you, you know? But I thought that was just kind of a nice, because she's like, yeah, I had a feeling we'd meet again. And I'm like, I thought that was interesting, because I was like, I had a feeling, like, when he met Sam, I was like, that just seemed like too important of a meeting for it just to be a one-off thing, which I guess, it's interesting how this whole thing works. Kind of a small world, just like you just happen to decide to go to, well, not happen to, like your dad kind of forced you to go to Lakeside. Lo and behold, you run into Marguerite, and then also, lo and behold, who does her half-sister turn out to be? Sam. But we did get a little bit more about the Sandy situation. I was under the assumption like Sandy had died and everyone kind of knew about it, but it's like Sandy's supposed to be in Florida, but for Sam, she's like, she actually talks about like, yes, she's actually closer in age to Sandy than she is Marguerite, so it's like, we kind of grew up kind of like twins a little bit. But she talked about the fact is that they've tried to contact Sandy, but they haven't been able to in like the past like 2 years. And it's like, if he was living with his dad, wouldn't we have gotten something by now? So it's like, that is interesting. Because I would, like I said, I was under the assumption that Sandy was just dead, but for it to be a thing of like, they don't know what's what about that. Like, I guess she's not in the best relationship with her husband to get any info, or he's just not saying anything, or maybe she can't get in contact with him. Maybe going to Florida isn't something in the cards right now, especially because of her youngest. Maybe that plays a role in it. But it's just like, that's an interesting situation. I wonder, is that going to like reveal to be something bigger than that? Like, maybe it's somebody that Wednesday or Shadow have crossed paths with in the past 2 seasons or something we just didn't realize, you know? But like I said, it's been 2 years. That's why I'm like, I don't know. I'm curious to find out what the hell that's going to end up being about. Especially because, like, it's like, oh yeah, if you hurt my sister. I mean, that might be foreshadowing to something, you know, whatever Shadow gets mixed up in, maybe Marguerite kind of gets dragged into, maybe not, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what that storyline ends up developing into. Especially because, like, oh, like, the fireflies are floating in the air, he's looking at them, and lo and behold, he sees Derek sneaking out of someone's place. He chases after Derek, but Derek ends up dropping the bag, looks through it. Oh, it turns out he's, like, the panty thief. You know? So it's like, because at first you're associating with whoever there is the reason Allison is missing, that's the person who's also stealing ladies' unmentionables. But it's like, seems like he's just doing a petty thing of like a perverted thing of I'm stealing underwear. But it doesn't see. Now part of me is wondering, you don't think him and Allison are kind of doing like a Romeo and Juliet, like, oh, let's get together and let's sneak away. Because maybe there's something more with her parents that no one else knows and he's trying to help her, and maybe all these like unmentionables he's getting is because if he tried to buy them, it'd be a whole thing of like, why are you buying these? And people would ask me the questions, just stealing them. I would assume so, because it's like, what's that all about? Like, why? Because it's not just like, I know it's weird to say, if he was just some random pervert, I would assume panties would be enough, but stealing bras too, it seems like he might be stealing stuff for her. I could be reading that wrong, but I'm like wondering what those circumstances are. Like, you know, like I said, it might be more to her family situation, which, you know, Chad kind of got chewed out earlier in the episode because so many people are upset because, you know, even Bill opened in his mouth. He's like, oh, you can't find someone in the next 48 hours, that first 48 hours, that they're most likely dead. Everyone in there's like, Bill, what the fuck is wrong with you? What would you say? He was like, I'm just saying, it's true. It's like, you don't need to say that, especially for damn parents in the place, you idiot. You know? And Chad's kind of getting chewed up because it's like, oh, I came by your house at like, what was it, 10:23? Your truck was you're in there asleep while this is all happening. It's like, well, to be fair, he's a human being. And from what we've seen, he seems like he's the only cop in town. So everything is kind of on him. But it's like also, you know, Chad kind of explains it away by being like, there hasn't literally been a serious crime in town since like 81. So for him, he can understand the town's frustration and he understands where they're coming from. But it's still like, oh, that's kind of sad that like Chad's getting the rough end of it. But then you had like Anne-Marie kind of step in and kind of calm down the situation. Like, if you got some pertinent information, line up over here. If you don't, stay where you are. Interestingly enough, because Marguerite also told Shadow that the place, you know, it's like, oh, she actually owns this building. And it's like, really? He's like, yeah, Anne-Marie's literally got her finger on everything in this town, doesn't she? She knows who everyone is. Apparently, she owns a lot of property here. And it's like, part of me is like, what's up with that? Like, is it going to be revealed that she's actually a god or something, too, of like, you know, maybe that's what it is? Or maybe it's just, it could just be a situation of, hey, she's kind of a powerful person in this town and things kind of go the way she wants them to. It kind of sounds a little godlike to me, and it could be a thing of like, this could be her worship. And gods do call for sacrifices from time to time, so maybe that's what Allison was, a sacrifice to Anne-Marie. I don't know. It's just a little suspicious to just, like, you know, especially when Marguerite, they made the point to let you know, like, oh yeah, she owns this place. Really? Oh, she has her finger. Like, that's why I'm like, there's definitely something up with her. I'm curious to see what that ends up being, if it ends up being anything at all. But, so, other than that, we also had, like, the Salim situation, which I love that he's in that, the hotel room, and it's like he's watching the TV, and it's like, oh, Salim, like, call, what was it, 593 FAP, and he was just like, the TV was talking to me, and she's like, yeah, you need to get over it, which is like, so the TV talking to you is not a weird thing in this world. Media did it all the time to mess with Shadow in season 1, so it's not that big of a stretch, but I guess Laura wouldn't know about that. But I just thought that was so interesting. Obviously, it's like, who's reaching out to him trying to, like, set that up? It's like, is that some other, like... Obviously, there's a deeper meaning for that, but I'm, like, wondering what the purpose of that is. At the same time, like, obviously, tying this into... Well, really quick, like, I forgot to finish off that aspect, because I obviously, it's like, well, we still got to track down Wednesday. Also, still don't have access to the spear. It's like, oh, we'll figure out a plan on our way to finding him. It's like, but also Celine's like, I could use this as an opportunity to ask about the Jin's whereabouts. And she's like, you need to move on. Like, the moment she said that, I was like, the irony behind that, because literally Shadow told you to do that, and you said, fuck that. And then immediately, while the people were banging next door, and like, I had noticed that earlier, like, oh, the box that Sweeney's ashes are in was like bumping, or I was like, oh, is it going to get knocked over? But before it could, at this point, Laura grabs it and holds on to it, and even Salim's looking at her. She's almost got this awkward look on her face, like, once again, another layer to the irony of like, oh, you're talking about moving on. And it's like, yeah, you're not willing to leave Sweeney behind, you know? So it's like, you know, obviously, regardless of what you say, you're really sweet on him. Like, it's one of those things that you never realize how important something was for you until it's gone, you know? So, I don't know. But also later on, they meet up with Mr. World, because it's like, hey, you want Odin taken care of? I do too. Let's be friends. Which is interesting, because, like, I mean, she has kind of screwed their situation over, considering she killed, God, I'm blanking on home dude's name. It's the god that was, like, with all the eyes. It's something with an A. I'm blanking on it right now. He was their eye in the sky. Regardless, she kind of did that. That kind of set them back, I guess, a tiny bit. So, you know. But I guess it's like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend type of situation. So, well, it's not really an enemy of... I don't know if he really knows that she's gunning for him. So, I mean, Odin's got his own stuff to worry about this episode. So I don't think he's really thinking about that in all. Plus, she's not like the super naturally strong zombie she once was. She's human now, but that doesn't mean she still can't gun for a god, you know? So there's that. But speaking of Mr. World, put on a new face this episode. Went from Mrs. World to Mr. World, but with a new face, that being Danny Trejo, which was interesting. Because I saw, like, promotional stuff with him. I assumed he was going to be a different guy. I didn't know he was just going to... I guess Mr. World / Mrs. World just going to be changing up faces the entire season. It's going to be interesting. But obviously, it's a whole thing about where the hell is the technical boy at, which he's dealing with his own situation. What I thought was interesting is, like, he's trying to get, like, an analysis of himself, and it's like, oh, what are you feeling? He's like, I've never felt this before. It's like these certain sensation. It's like, well, what emotions are? He's like, what are you talking about emotions? I don't have any. So part of me is like, is that supposed to be the point of it? Is like, you are getting emotional because you are starting to be, is it trying to make you more human? Could that be what that is? Like, he's losing less of the godhood that he was and becoming more human. Is it just because he's been so practical and unemotional and attached towards everything and everyone? I mean, he says he's had no emotions, but like, obviously the way he handled his friend from last season, kind of going against him, like, it was kind of like, it was almost, I mean, granted, it was Mr. World's plan and everything, but it was still almost like him being petty a little bit. So that's why I'm like, is there really no emotion there? I don't know. Maybe Bilquis, you know, kind of being like, well, at least was kind of labeled as a goddess of love. I don't know if she necessarily will consider herself that now, but like, maybe she kind of added a little humanity to him, and that's kind of what's crippling him, because he is a technical boy. He is the, like, representation of technology. It's supposed to be just this machine that, you know, machines typically have no feeling, so he might be a little Tin Man-ish right now. Maybe, I don't know. But to get the full analysis, he needs something known as the Artifact 1, and he even had that line from Mr. World being like, of all my children, technical boy, you are kind of basically being like, you're my favorite. And even him technical boy looking like, what? He's like, I know I'm hard on you sometimes, but that's just because, you know, you can only, none of the others can handle what you can. I mean, the shard system, yeah, without you, it's nothing but data. You are the core principle that kind of organizes it and makes it what it is. So I need you. You know, we'll kind of figure this out together. Whether you need, even I was like, that's horseshit. Because even he said it was horseshit earlier. Because it's like, what have you tried to do every time you threaten to get rid of me? Anytime I'm proved not to be useful. First with new media. And, you know, it's like, what am I supposed to feel? Then we also get him into, like, talking to somebody. Which is like, I thought you were, like, top dog. So who the hell are you, like, responding to? Like, is it, like, someone on the same level? Or, but then part of me is like, you don't think he's actually talking to himself. That, like, the Mr. World we've been seeing might not be the real Mr. World. That, you know, might be another thing of like, oh yeah, I've kind of copied myself while I'm off doing other stuff. So maybe he's talking to the real Mr. World while he's just kind of like a cloned copy. Or maybe there's someone else, like I said, either on the same level. But it sounded like he was almost talking to someone of a higher thing of like, oh yeah, I was thinking the same thing too, like how they handle this. Even then, it's like, oh yeah, there's this artifact. It seems like he has it, and it's like, yeah, the technical boy doesn't realize it's like 2 miles underground or something away from him. I'm like, who are you talking to? What's this all about? And even said at one point in time, I don't know, she kind of popped out of nowhere. Part of me was like, could that have something to do with Bilquis? Because she just like, well, we don't know where she went after, like her and Shadow went their separate ways. So maybe that was kind of reference to her, something else. I don't know. It's going to be interesting if there is technically someone higher than Mr. World, because it seemed like he's the one leading the new gods, but maybe he's not. Maybe he's kind of like the face of the operation when in actuality there's someone even higher. We'll see. But, so other than that, we deal with the Demeter side of things. Obviously, we learned a little bit more about their history. It was actually kind of a love triangle situation between him, Demeter, and Tyr. Obviously, I like that whole monologue at the beginning about, like, you know, America having like one destiny and, you know, two gods of war, each wanting something else, you know, Odin wanting, you know, power and influence, you know, but Tyr obviously kind of wanting, I mean, I think that also shows you where they are in their lives too, for Tyr to be the dentist that he is, while Odin continues to be the war god that he is. So I guess it kind of shows you where they are in their lives and the things that they want. Because even later on, Tyr is like, I have no regrets about the path I took down. Can you honestly say the same thing? He's got a lot of regrets, I'm sure, because, you know, not only, I mean, we actually don't know how many of his kids are dead. We know Donar is, and then we find out, and I had a feeling during that conversation that him and Demeter had, I think it might have been the last episode, made it seem like she and him had a kid together that they lost. It seemed like, because that's why when she sees like, oh, this is my, when he was like, oh, this is my son, Shadow Moon, she almost looked like, oh, because I think it's almost like I think that's also her issue with him. It's like, you're so get what you want, but you don't care about people's feelings, because it's like, that's kind of a slap to the face, bringing your son around, because I'm sure it's like, oh, you went off and had another kid, because for her it's probably like she probably never had any other children. At least it doesn't, she might have, but it might be a thing of like the scars of having lost a child might be too much to be like ever decide to ever bring another child in this world, because it's just too much pain, you know, it's a pain you rather not deal with. So probably just avoid the subject entirely. But to find out like, well, Shadow's not his first kid, it's, you know, it's at least his third kid that we're aware of, because obviously there's Donar too, which he lost. But losing a kid is not, obviously we saw how much it affected, like hearing like him tell the story of Donar last season, like especially how things ended between them. I think that made it, I mean, I was about to say it doesn't make it harder or easier. It's a different type of pain. Losing a child at such a young age, a different pain than losing a child at an adult age like that, considering they also like ended off things pretty badly. So I mean, once again, it's just, it goes back to prove the pattern of just how selfish Wednesday can be sometimes. Well, not sometimes, a lot of times. But obviously I love that he's like, I do love like the little like cat and mouse game that him and Demeter have this episode, where it's like she's trying to get him kicked out, and she like sets it up so there's a whole bunch of pills found, like Hank finds them, and he's like, whoa, and it's like, whoa, it's like, normally I have to do a cavity search. He's like, whoa, there's nothing up my butt than the usual stuff. He's also like, I'm not a pill guy. But even later on being like, it could have been like peyote, it could have been ayahuasca, but pills? How pedestrian of you. But she's doing whatever she can to get him kicked out. But I did love that, like, he's actually playing matchmaker. He's dealing with his own love situation, but also he's trying to hook up Hank and Elizabeth. It's like, oh yeah, she's totally into you. He's like, really? You think she's into me? It's like, yeah. Why else would she be standing there listening to that jibber jabber of yours and putting on a smile anyway and kind of responding to your nonsense? And and it's like, I don't need a drug, I am a drug. And as he's walking away, you see that kind of like vibrant aura around him. I thought that was interesting. But also, like, later on when he's talking to Demeter, because it's like, oh, like, tomorrow night will make a week I've been here. So if I'm still here, that means you still owe me that one night. And she starts breaking pots. And she's like, oh, how could this barbarian just came over here and started doing this? He was like, my mistake. I was getting roses or something for you. And he's like, no, don't tell me the whole story about you getting flowers for me and Elizabeth. But it's like, let's clean this up. He's like, right. It's like, it's so confusing too, because he's just kind of running the place. Because there was even that lady Elsa who was like, why are you sick? Like, why are you even here? You're not even really sick. Which you had Demeter be like, oh yeah, you can't really judge someone, for their issues, because their issues could lie a lot deeper. Like her saying like him kind of having a black soul and not really caring and feeling. But he did put on that shadow show, as he corrects Hank, who said puppet show. And he'd kind of written out a script. And I like that Hank was like, oh, I get it. You're Tyr, and then, she's Demeter. Who's this Odin guy? He sounds like such an asshole. And then, like, Odin being like, everyone's a damn critic. But it's not till after the show that, Hank was like, I get it. In the story, you're Odin. And it's like, yep, you figured it out. Because hearing the story about, Tyr was obviously infatuated with Demeter, and obviously, like, he was a more compassionate person. Like, his love was a little more sincere, whereas, like, she was attracted more to Odin just because he kind of made her pulse pound, a little bit. And so it was just kind of like just love at first sight. The sparks flew, and Tyr tried to bury like how he really felt, but when the time came, and there, eventually. Demeter and Odin had to say goodbye to their child. Odin left. Instead of being there to comfort Demeter, he went off and fought a war. Like, obviously, everyone kind of grieves in their own way, but for her, it's like, you weren't there. We could have done it together, but for him, it was just, he even admits, he was like, I was a coward. I gave into my fear, my cowardice. It even explains later on, it's like, death is something you can't fight. It's like when someone's gone as such a child, especially under the circumstances of losing someone that young, it's like, you can't fight something like that. You can't fight death in that regard. It's just kind of like and the sadness it leaves you with, there's no fighting that. It's just, you have to like live with it. You have to carry that. That's all you can do, And Tyr's being there for her. And Tyr's kind of, is like, yeah, she asked me to come here, but he's like, I don't know, I don't know her feelings, but it's like, how about you just ask her, Odin, like how she really feels, and actually listen? And I think that's still his issue even at the end of it. I even love him going like, you fucking tooth fairy. I was like, why you gotta talk mad shit like that? Because I guess he is your love rival. Because at least with Demeter, it's like, because the way Taylor was saying, like, she's still unclear whether you really want to be with her or whether you just want her money. Because Demeter was like, there's not a dishonest bone in Tyr's body, And obviously, Odin, Wednesday goes to see Demeter, and he talks about, his biggest regret was that. But even she's like, I needed to hate you to kind of deal with my sadness. But even then, it still was a thing of like, I have every right to hate you for leaving the way you did. Which she was saying, like, she is like, you are right. I have kind of been running from, because I think who knows if she's been in here the entire time, but at least a good chunk of time she has like locked herself away from the world. Maybe not in this necessary form. Maybe she's did it in other ways over the years, over the centuries, in fact. But she kind of locked herself off from the world, and she'd like to rejoin the world, And, even Odin, Wednesday saying like, we could shed a tear for our child, as we kind of, rally the old gods for war, lead them into war. And she's like, there you are. That's the man I first knew. Kind of once again showing that even in this moment, it couldn't just be, let's mourn our child. You had to be like, let's do it, and then right off into war. It's like you couldn't for a moment separate what you want, So it kind of shows her like, I'm just the means to an end. Like, I don't know. When it's all said and done, it's hard to say how she really felt, what was in her heart. well, what it tells me at the very end is that maybe she decided, well, I will rejoin the world, but not with you, Odin. I won't be, it's like, I've seen that you haven't changed. You're not really ready to do this, so I'm not going to be your piece to play in this war. Whether it's, no matter how sincere your feelings are, which I do believe they are, but I think it's just, I think Wednesday's just kind of a mess when it comes to dealing with his feelings, And so when the time came, he sees Demeter kind of breaking apart and going in. I think it's her, like, I don't know if it's necessarily dying, but I think returning to Earth, the world. It's her way of just kind of, like, fading away and just, either I guess she's saying, like, I've been here too long, like, I want to be with my child wherever they are. So I think she just kind of gave herself over and just kind of returned to nature in that regard. I don't know. I feel like there's probably ways you can interpret that, but also at the same time, like, she's floating to the petals and stuff floating to the sky, and then it starts raining, and I think that's her way of mourning her child, like fully embracing the mourning and just letting go. And and all you can do, like all Wednesday can do, is sit there. It's like maybe if it said something different, maybe it did something different, or maybe this is just what Demeter needed. It's like, once again, it's like you didn't listen to what she needed, like. He did, but even then, he still kind of made it about him and what he wanted. So that's still, the issue in the grand scheme of things. So actually, a sad note to end the episode on. So I don't know if there's going to be any returning for that for her. It's still unclear, at least to me, how the whole God thing works. Because obviously, in some cases, if you have enough believers, you can come back. But I guess in the case of Demeter, who's kind of used this place to get her worship. Like, no one's really like, oh, Demeter are praying to her and worshiping her like that. We did see Elsa crying, so I guess she kind of knew what Demeter was doing. So there's still some people, but not enough to kind of hold on to bringing her back, because, like, a god's death is the moment, like, people stop believing in them. They're truly dead. There's no coming back from that. So, but it seemed like this was kind of like a goodbye in many different regards. Once again, I think it's just going to be another regret that he has. So I'm curious to see how this ultimately ends up playing out and what this does to Wednesday. Is he going to, like, go full throttle just so that he doesn't have to deal with it? Is he going to run again, or what is he going to do? Especially, when he talks to Shadow next. Like, I think we're going to see, like, this is going to have a major effect on him, that he might not be the quippy asshole that he kind of is sometimes. Like, this really did cause some pain and some hurt. So I don't know, I'm curious to see what kind of happens. I mean, especially, like, Laura might be picking the perfect time, because he might be at his lowest right now. That is actually might be the best time to strike. Once again, still have no idea how to get around that whole Sweeney's Horde situation of getting Gungnir out of there, but maybe Mr. World can help in that regard. We'll see. I'm really interested to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.